I'm Pieterjan and I am Product Marketeer at Sensolus. Welcome to a new episode of Track and Talk. This is our channel where we keep track on how IoT can help you to make all your assets visible, from a small box to a giant container. And today I'm joined by Jeremy, Head of Customer Success at Sensolus. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Pieterjan.
The first question I always ask to people in this podcast, how do you charge your batteries in your personal life? Because battery life is an important thing for Sensolus, but I'm always curious to hear your energy drivers.
Yeah. So in winter, I like skiing. Nothing charges my battery better than a week in the mountains.
Okay.
In summer, I like hiking a lot, walking in the nature. And the other 360 days in Belgium, when it's rainy and the weather is less nice, then I like to go to concerts. I go to music concerts.
Yeah.
That's the things that bring me the energy I need to do my job.
Cool. Today we won't talk about skiing or hiking, but we have a super interesting topic to discuss, is tracking our trackers. Mm-hmm. And before we dive into this, why is it important to track a tracker?
Yeah, good question. IoT solutions are used in businesses to make business decisions. You decide how many assets to buy, what tasks to give to certain people, what suppliers to work with based on IoT information. So the data that you use, the information provided by the IoT solution, needs to be accurate and reliable.
Okay.
And so that's why we need to track all components, all technical components of the solution to make sure they work fine. And the tracking devices are part of that solution. So we need to track them and make sure they work as they should do.
All right. We will touch upon three topics in this this talk. Is first the configuration of the settings of this tracker. Mm-hmm. Secondly, the diagnostics. So once they're in the field, how do we follow up? And last but not least is, how on earth do you manage thousands of trackers that are in the field? How can you update them? That's really something I would like to know from you. But maybe let's start with the configuration of a tracker. What do we mean with setting the configurations of a tracker?
Yeah. The tracking devices, you see, there's small devices. We put them on different types of assets.
Like this example, by the way. We have some nice
container, pallets.
Yeah, cool.
Stillages, other types of devices, and they need to work for multiple years and provide and update us with the information about the location and the activity of the assets. There's multiple things we can configure. We can configure how they determine the location using GPS satellites, using local infrastructure, other solution, and we can configure how often they need to update this information. And on one hand, you could say we want the data all the time. So every minute we want the location, but then batteries won't last very long.
I can imagine.
On the other side, you could say, I need the location once a day, but then it might be 24 hours later than you expect.
And that's something you decide in the configuration of the settings.
That's
you can really pinpoint to the details of what are the data points, how many, when, what.
There's hundreds of different settings that you can play with. And that determine how this tracking device will act. But there's actually two things which are really important to understand and to keep in mind, is that it's always a balance. And the first thing, it's always a balance between a lot of information but a short battery life, or less information but a very long battery life. Right? So that's one thing.
Okay.
And the second thing, which is important in our business, is that different assets that we track, they behave differently.
Okay.
So we track trailers. Trailers are always outdoors. They drive a lot, so they move all the time. And you want pretty real-time data if you're tracking trailers. But maybe you're okay with changing the batteries every 2 years or 3 years. We also track waste containers. We put they're put at a customer site and they stay there for weeks. They don't move. Different behavior. We also track pallets. They arrive in a truck. They go inside a building. So we can't always use GPS because GPS doesn't work inside. So we use different technologies. So knowing which asset you track for which use case is really important to set the settings correct.
And that's why we call it a smart tracker, I would imagine, because it will learn, or it will see the context, the situation it is in, and then it will act accordingly.
Exactly. Because if you do it wrong, you can have really strange things.
Like what? Give me an example. What can go wrong with tracking assets?
For example, we were tracking in the early days, we were tracking a big asset, hundreds of kilos.
Okay.
And our data, suddenly we looked at the data and the data said, well, this asset moved from the north of Belgium to Paris in 1 minute.
So we can do teleportation with our
We can do teleportation with our trackers. In the end, it turned out it was not correct. And the reason is that we use the accelerometer, which is a chip that monitors changes in motion and in acceleration and in speed. Okay. And the tracker was configured for transportation over road. On a truck.
Okay.
It monitors when the truck starts to move, when it stops moving.
Yeah. Okay.
But in this specific case, the asset was put on a boat, and the boat was traveling over water, and the water attenuates the movements. And our tracker didn't understand that actually it was moving. So I thought, I'm still here, here. And then one minute later, so to speak, it was thousands of kilometers.
So we can say that the configuration of a tracker becomes a great responsibility. The power you have also implies that you need to really think about how
you use the same trackers on containers that move over sea as over land, but they're configured differently.
Okay. So if I would summarize the topic around the configuration of a tracker, I would first say the configuration depends on the use case of your client. What do they need? How many data points? The battery life. Yeah. And also, this is a smart tracker. So it will behave depending on the context it's in. When it starts its journey or it ends its journey, you can have different configurations set, and that makes it smart.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So after the configuration, I imagine the trackers are put in the field, attached to an asset, but then diagnostics come in place. What do we mean with diagnostics?
Well, the goal for the end user, the people using the system and enjoying the data, is that it's a completely plug-and-play solution.
Yeah. Okay.
The trackers are on the assets, the data is gathered in a platform, they see dashboards, reports, and they make business decisions based on that. But behind the scenes, there's quite some complexity, because these things have a SIM card, they communicate over networks, they roam between countries, they can be indoor where no satellites are seen. So there's a lot of complexity. And you don't want the end user to be concerned about that complexity, because otherwise IoT would never find its way to business. Yeah. And that's exactly the role that Sensolus plays. We check for every individual tracker that it works correctly. And it goes into all of the details. So for every of the thousands and thousands of trackers from all of our customers in the field, we know exactly when it uses battery energy. Okay. We know how difficult it was to communicate with the network, how many seconds it took to establish a connection, how many satellites it found, how many minutes it took to find a location. All of these things are kept for every individual tracker, so that we know exactly how much energy is used and other KPIs.
I can imagine you can even be proactive with the diagnostics, like we're seeing this is happening, your client act accordingly.
Exactly. We know for each use case what the normal behavior is. Yeah. So we know if the tracker is consuming more energy than expected. Yeah. So it's better to tell our customers, your trackers are consuming more than what you expect. You want 7 years of battery autonomy. With this behavior, it'll only be 3. But I'm telling you this now so you can change the configuration, or you can change how you install the tracker on your asset so that you can reach that lifetime.
I can imagine that with these trackers and IoT, there's maybe a situation where we understand the business of our clients on some levels better than themselves. I can imagine this happened before, like they ask us questions and we could answer them, although it's their business.
It does, it happens. And I know it's very fun you mentioned that. Let me give you an example. For example, I talked about indoor-outdoor. Outdoor trackers, they use GPS because they can reach it. They can see the satellites. Indoor, we use Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, other technologies to find the location. So we have customers and they tell us our assets are always outdoor. It's stillages. They come, the glass is removed, they stay on the parking until they are picked up by the transport company again. So we configure for outdoor. We look at the data. Diagnostics tells us this is not really working like this. So we call the customer. I think your assets are sometimes indoor. First reaction is this is weird. It's not really possible. Let's investigate. Investigate, and they see assets are used indoor by their clients or suppliers for different purposes, which is not according to contracts. So they can act, they can do a business action based on the diagnostics data. So that's really interesting.
Nice example, indeed, how we can deliver that. So I'll remember two main things here is that based on the diagnostics, we can react proactive. Like things are happening, we see them in the field, we can adjust the behavior. And second, sometimes trackers and IoT allow us to better understand the business of our clients than themselves. Yeah. Because we have the data, we can guide them towards a better performance. Okay.
Indeed.
Now, I imagine that there are thousands of these assets around the globe. And I've attached a tracker to them, but then there's an update to be done. I don't think we go one by one and update the tracker. But how do we solve this kind of a challenge? Yeah.
And it starts by monitoring the fleet. So indeed, we have hundreds and thousands of trackers, different use cases, different countries, different parts of the world. So we can't monitor individually whether every tracker is working fine. So that's the first part. So what we do, we monitor trends. We monitor evolution of certain important KPIs. For example, the number of trackers which is not communicating. This can be a worry for a customer, and these trackers are not communicating, but sometimes it's normal because they're transported in a sealed container overseas, so 2 weeks we won't see anything. It's normal. So we monitor if this number of not communicating trackers is increasing, decreasing, or stable. Based on that, we again can be proactive. We look at the number of generated reports to look a bit more on the data side. If a customer has 500 reports a month, but suddenly this decreases, maybe they're not using certain features anymore, maybe some things are wrong, maybe some users change, so again, we can act proactively. How do you then act upon that? That's more towards your question. How can you make these changes? Well, there it's important to know the use cases again and to understand your customers. If we develop new features which can greatly improve the experience or the data that transport companies get from trailers, we can promote these features and push them in the field towards the tracking devices remotely from our platform, but only to these customers. And we reach out to them, ask them if they want some more information about these features, give them a demo. So we're also there and improving the service all the time, we can be proactive.
So we can do a full deployment, but also a target deployment of settings towards specific trackers in a specific use case.
Exactly.
So two things to remember here is once the thousands of trackers are in the field, you need a system to update them, knowing that with Sensolus we have more than 1 million connected assets. That's a thing for us, it's important. And secondly, we can push updates to specific group of trackers depending on the use case, so it can be very, very targeted.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Jimmy, for your insights. It was very interesting to hear talk about tracking the trackers. Thank you for listening or watching. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or listen on Spotify to our podcast, and hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.